for its second reading.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Dr David Clark.
Mr Speaker, this bill follows neatly on from the last that we've had, and that is because it is also about tinkering. It's an omnibus bill, as the Minister has told us, and it does some worthy things. I will not deny that. The Minister is striving to ensure that the tax system we have has loopholes plugged. He's making some useful flip-flops on KiwiSaver, and he is tightening up one or two things that it's good to address. The submitters to the Finance and Expenditure Committee, that was well run by members opposite, made a number of salient points, and so we had some general consensus around changes that should be made. We heard from Mr Crooks, Mr Gilchrist, Mr Lay, Ms Buddle Finlay, Coalition of Insolvency Practitioners, Contact Energy Limited, New Zealand Law Society, New Zealand Computer Society, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Corporate Taxpayers Group, Grant Rea Partners, KPMG, New Zealand Bankers Association, and so on. You get the picture. These were a worthy group of submitters who had given this bill full attention, and so I think it's fair to say that technically it's a very competent bill, and the Labour Party will support it on that basis. However, the thing this bill does not do, Mr Speaker, is address the real problems with our taxation system. This bill does nothing to address the 4% drop in revenue since this government came to office 4 years ago. The GFC, as the Honourable Dr Nick Smith points out, did have an effect on the tax take. The member is quite right, and the IRD attributed that 1.5% of the drop in tax take, of a 4% drop, was because of the GFC, the global financial crisis. The other 2.5% they attributed to policy changes. And we know that the biggest change in recent times are the tax changes of 2010 that the government made. They have seen government revenue plummet. And this bill does nothing to directly address those. Sure, it stops a few loopholes. It does make some small amount of difference, but no measurable difference in that respect. The Finance Minister continues to describe those changes made in 2010 as broadly fiscally neutral, and with that we know he takes some licence from his surname, but he is really redefining the English language in that respect. Broadly has been given new meaning, Mr Speaker, I would suggest, because fiscally neutral usually refers to the forecast period, which is a 4-year period. Now the Minister is referring to the business cycle. He stopped saying that it's fiscally neutral. He started saying it's broadly neutral over the business cycle. This is evidence of a government that is struggling. It's struggling in this area. It does not have pro-growth tax policies, and so the investment signals that people are getting encourage them to put money into the speculative sector and not into the productive sector. This is something that needs to change, and this is not addressed in the bill in any sense, really, because other than stopping some loopholes, which again could be speculative but probably are not productive, it does nothing to address that. It also does nothing to increase savings. We need a universal KiwiSaver. Now, this bill does raise the employee contribution rate for KiwiSaver from 2% to 3%. National has been flip-flopping all over the place on KiwiSaver. Only 2 years ago, I'll remind members of this House, National cut the employee contribution from 4% to 2%. So it's gone down from 4% to 2%, and now the government's putting it back up from 2% to 3%. It is all over the place. It has more positions on KiwiSaver than the Kama Sutra, I would contest, Mr Speaker. So we see the government is tinkering with savings, but it doesn't really have a vision for this sector. The minimum wage increase, which my members' bill puts forward, would assist with savings policy, because it would ensure that working New Zealanders, hard-working New Zealanders, could make contributions to this KiwiSaver scheme addressed in the bill. So we know we need pro-growth tax policy. We know we need savings increases. If we look across the ditch to Australia, we see they have $1 trillion in their superannuation scheme, looking for a home, looking to support businesses. We have nothing like that in New Zealand. Muldoon scrapped it. A previous national government's leaders scrapped this scheme, and if we had it today, we know we'd be in a much better position. We'd have greater capital depth in this country. But this bill does not directly address that problem. All it does is correct a few loopholes. The R&D tax credits that could change it are not in there, nor is monetary policy change to support our exporters. And why we're not getting that, why we're getting this kind of bill, Mr. Speaker, I want to contest, is because we have a problem with the IRD. We have a computer problem in the IRD that this government has not yet dealt with. We have computer systems that are on their last legs. We have, I want to quote from the Prime Minister, who said in February this year that tax policy is being held up because the computer systems, and here's the quote, can't actually support radical changes from government. This Prime Minister here, the National Prime Minister, says that his own tax department can't actually support radical changes from government. This is the Prime Minister of this country saying that they cannot make significant changes that will be of benefit to our country. This is really troubling stuff. You don't want to be in a position where Parliament is held hostage to a lack of technology. Who said that? That was the Prime Minister. Yes, he said you do not want to be in a position, the current Prime Minister, where Parliament is held hostage to a lack of technology. That is precisely what we've got. That's why we've got this watered-down legislation. That's why we've got legislation that is not going to make a difference to New Zealand. That is why our economy is in the doldrums. This is what he told the Parliament. And we know that when the government did attempt to do something about this, it was told when it first came to office that the system was on its last legs. And we know that Mr Dunn received that briefing, and they did start to try and address some of the issues. They made a $21 million false start. A $21 million false start. That's taxpayer money that went into a system. I think they did the right thing in pulling out, by all accounts. It went nowhere. But what have they done since? We have no plan as to how this tax system is going to be fixed. We have the ageing first core computer system now more than 20 years old. Built in 1992. It was before Google, before Facebook. This is the system that we are reliant on as a country to ensure confidence in our tax system, and we have a Prime Minister who tells us we can't rely on it. So, Mr Speaker, I want to say that we are in a dire position, and that is why this government is reduced to tinkering on tax policy. Partly, it does not want to address the big issues, but partly it's hamstrung because it doesn't have a clear plan as to how it's going to get the systems in place. And it's about time the taxpayers of New Zealand were given a clear picture of how this problem was going to be addressed, Mr Speaker. So this bill does raise the employee contribution for KiwiSaver from 2% to 3% after National wound it back from 4% to 2% previously. It's also true that the big ideas that the government has, are reduced to things like the paperboy tax. We know that was the big idea in the budget from the government. This is along similar lines. We have an omnibus bill. It's worthy. It closes a few gaps, but it really is not going to address those big issues. The tax switch, which all our hard-working New Zealanders are hurting from, is still in place. The top 44% of New Zealanders got the top 10% of New Zealanders got just 44% of the value of those tax cuts. The bottom 20% got about 2% of the value. We've got a tax system that's not fair, and we've got a computer system which can hardly keep up. The IRD computer upgrade, we're told, is going to cost $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion, this new computer system, and yet we don't have a timetable, and we don't have a sense of who's going to build it, what it's going to look like, how it's going to give us confidence as taxpayers that our tax dollars are properly being collected. We need a government that needs to get its act together. We need this government to get its act together, to get our tax system together, so that we can actually make the changes that will take New Zealand ahead as a country. We can stop our workers flying away to Australia because there's no prospects here, because the tax system can't handle pro-growth tax policy. We need to make a difference, Mr Speaker, and I contest that the national government is not on top of this, and it must get up to speed and fix this issue.
Well, Todd McLeay.
Mr Speaker, please.